They fined me for fishing, said I was disturbing the ecosystem, said it violated HOA Ordinance 7C, subclause 12, a line buried in a 400-page handbook I never agreed to. I paid the fine. Then I bought the lake and banned them all. But that's not the story. The story is what I discovered when I did. About them, about the system, about you. Because when I took ownership of that water, when I became the god of that land, I saw behind the curtain of suburbia. I saw what you were never supposed to see. Not just an HOA, not just Karen with a clipboard, a hidden control system, as old as the land, as deep as the deeds, and it's still operating right now on your street. You think you're free because you own your home? You're not. You're leased to compliance. And every blade of grass in your yard is a surveillance node. Every neighbor, a potential enforcer. Smile for the bake sale. Nod at the block party. But know this, they're watching, measuring, judging. And when the time comes, they will strike, under the cover of community guidelines. That fine they gave me, it wasn't about fish. It was a test, a loyalty check, a probe to see how far I'd bend before I broke. But I didn't bend. I bought the battlefield. And now I'm here to show you what war actually looks like in the suburbs. Not guns, not tanks, ink, code, clauses, fines, and fear disguised as order. Now lean in, because I'm about to tell you the real reason HOA enforcement exists, and why no man walks away from it untouched. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a warning, because what they did to me, they're already doing to you. You just haven't noticed yet. But once you see it, truly see it, you'll never unsee it. And by the end of this video, you'll either be a soldier in the quietest war America's ever waged, or another casualty behind a white picket fence. The choice? It won't be yours for long. Let's begin. They told you the American dream was home ownership. They handed you the keys and hid the chains in the paperwork. You see that deed you signed? It's not proof you're free. It's proof you've entered their domain. Look closely. That signature doesn't just bind you to the property. It binds you to a hidden set of rulers, a private government without votes, without oversight, and without mercy. The HOA. It's the only institution in America that can fine you, sue you, seize your property, and humiliate you, all without a courtroom, a judge, or even public record. You think the courthouse is the law? No. The law lives in a backroom binder in a strip mall HOA office. Written by people you've never met, enforced by neighbors with clipboards and power complexes. They call it preserving property values. What they mean is, conform or be punished. I was fined $75 for hanging a flag at an unapproved angle. I was warned for leaving my truck in my own driveway overnight. I was cited for unlicensed water activity. When I threw a line into the lake, I thought my tax dollars helped maintain. But here's the truth. These were not violations. They were rituals, tests, probes, initiation rites for a game I never agreed to play. The HOA isn't about community. It's about compliance. A slow, tightening noose around your independence, disguised as a welcome basket and a rulebook. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized, this isn't new. This system dates back decades, sometimes centuries, hidden in covenants called restrictive agreements. Ancient codes written in legalese that no homeowner ever reads, but every homeowner signs. They don't just tell you how high your grass can grow. They tell you who you are allowed to be, what color your door can be, what flag you can fly, what you can build, when you can gather, how you can live. They turn individual men into docile tenants on the land they fought to own. And just when you think you found freedom, they come knocking with a clipboard and a smile. Just a reminder, just a small note, just a friendly warning. But make no mistake, Every warning is a shot fired. Every fine is a scar. And every meeting you skip is another rule passed in your name. This is not a community. This is a fortress of quiet control. And if you're not watching your six, you're already in chains. Let me ask you something dangerous. Who actually runs your neighborhood? Not the mayor. Not the city council. Not even the people you vote for. It's a committee of unelected neighbors with godlike power. A handful of people who enforce rules you didn't write, interpret laws you never approved, and decide your fate over donuts and coffee in a conference room next to a dry cleaner. But here's the part they never tell you. The HOA board doesn't answer to you. They answer to the management company behind the scenes. A corporate entity that profits every time you slip up. Every violation is a transaction. Every letter you get in the mail is an invoice for your obedience. And the board? They're just enforcers. Volunteers, yes, but volunteers who taste power for the first time in their lives and become drunk on it. You've seen them. The neighbor who suddenly wears a badge of authority when she sees a misplaced garbage bin. The guy with the walkie-talkie at 2 a.m. monitoring the neighborhood like it's a war zone. These aren't citizens. They're converts, willing pawns of a system that feeds off the illusion of safety and the reality of surveillance. They don't care about your rights. They care about your submission. And when you resist, when you question, they tighten the leash. You'll receive a letter, not a conversation. You'll be fined, not warned. You'll be summoned, not respected. Because in their world, you are the problem, not the broken system, not the predatory enforcement tactics, not the $600 a month fees for pool repairs that never seem to get done. You are the risk, the variable they cannot control, the wolf among sheep. And they fear that. So they isolate you, label you, make you the troublemaker. And if you push too far, they'll take your home. It's called a lien, and they'll place it on your property like a parasite. And if you refuse to pay, foreclosure, eviction, public shame, all for questioning the rules of a group you never elected, funded by fees you had no choice but to pay, living in a house you thought you owned. This isn't just a bad system. It's a design system, engineered to train compliance into homeowners the way a shock collar trains a dog to stay behind a fence. But here's the hidden truth. The real fence isn't the one around your yard. It's the one inside your mind. And once that's built, they own you. Completely. The day I bought the lake was the day I saw it all. Not just the paperwork, the deeds, the water rights. I saw the structure. The spiderweb hidden beneath the neighborhood smiles and manicured lawns. And I realized something they never expected me to understand. The lake wasn't just water. It was control. It was the HOA's power symbol. A pristine piece of nature they paraded at every meeting, bragged about in every flyer. Community Lake, they called it. But it wasn't for the community. It was for leverage. Access wasn't a right. It was a privilege. And privilege, in their world, is currency. They loan it out. They take it back. They use it to shape behavior, punish disobedience, and reward submission. I had violated their illusion of control when I fished there. They couldn't let it slide. So they struck a violation fine, a formal warning, a demand for an apology. But what they didn't know was that I had already started asking questions. I had already pulled the covenants, read the bylaws, traced the ownership trail. And what I found? The lake wasn't actually theirs. It was owned by a development trust, a dormant entity created during the original land deal, long before the HOA ever existed. And that trust? It was up for sale. So I bought it. Cash. No announcement. No warning. No press. 1 week later, I owned the soul of their little kingdom. And when I sent them my letter, informing them that all HOA access to the lake was now revoked indefinitely. They panicked. The same people who fined me for casting a line were now begging to restore community harmony. Suddenly, I was the one holding the leash. But I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because the lake showed me what they really are. Parasites, not protectors, not guardians of value or tradition, but fragile enforcers of an invisible prison, terrified of losing the illusion of order. And when you take that away, when you rip their rules out from under them, they shatter, because their power was never real. It was granted by your belief in their authority. And once you stop believing, they're nothing but neighbors in cheap suits screaming into a void they no longer control. That day, I didn't just buy a lake. I reclaimed dominion. And in doing so, I learned the deepest truth of all. Control doesn't come from rulebooks. It comes from the will to defy them. If you felt the chill of HOA power, if you've ever looked out your window and wondered how your freedom became so fragile, then drop this in the comments right now. No more fences. No more kings. Write it twice. Once for yourself. Once for every man still asleep in his castle of lies. Because we are not their subjects. We are the storm. It starts small. A letter in the mail. A note on your door. Violation notice. Lawn exceeds allowable height by 1.5 inches. You laugh it off. But that was the first knock. You fix it. You comply. You think, not worth the hassle. And that's exactly what they count on. Because the first rule of HOA warfare is this. They don't need you to lose. They need you to surrender. Quietly. Internally. Piece by piece. It's not about lawns or flags or patio furniture. It's about conditioning. One tiny rule at a time. Until you start policing yourself. You start second-guessing. Is my garbage bin too close to the curb? Did I leave my garage door open too long? Can I install that swing set? Or do I need permission? That's how they break you. Not with force. With repetition. This is psychological warfare engineered in legal ink and soft voices. And most men never see it happen. They think it's just how it is. They think the HOA is annoying but necessary. But here's what they don't see. Behind the bureaucracy is a blueprint. And behind the blueprint is a belief system. One where uniformity is safety. One where independence is a threat. You ever notice how they talk about property values? Like it's a religion? They say it's to protect the community. But what they mean is protect the illusion. Keep every house the same. Every person predictable. Every expression approved. Because if one man dares to act freely, to fly a flag, paint a mural, dig a garden without a permit, he becomes a crack in the mask. A symbol of something dangerous. Choice. And choice spreads. That's why they hit fast. That's why they fine hard. That's why they escalate with a smile and a, we're just following procedure. But they're not following anything. They're maintaining obedience. This is not a community association. This is a psychological lab. And you're the experiment. Compliance becomes habit. Habit becomes culture. And culture becomes control. And before you know it, your neighborhood is a simulation. Same grass. Same lights, same holidays, same flags, same thoughts, and any deviation, any personal sovereignty, treated like a disease. You don't believe me? Ask a man who painted his house the wrong shade of beige. Ask the veteran fined for flying the flag he bled for. Ask the family told they couldn't build a ramp for their disabled son without a design review. The HOA isn't broken. It's functioning perfectly, and its purpose is simple, to kill resistance before it's even born. So if you're still thinking, it's just a few rules, understand this, they don't need to win a war against you. They only need to convince you it's not a war at all. Now listen closely, because this is where it gets real. You think you live under American law? That your rights are protected by the Constitution? Not in HOA territory. Here, there's a second system, one that operates parallel to the real world, but completely outside of it. No due process, no public hearings, no jury of your peers, just letters, fines, escalation. You are not innocent until proven guilty. You are guilty because they said so, and if you want to fight back, you'll have to pay to do it. Want to appeal a violation? Pay a fee. Want to speak at a board meeting? Submit a request. Maybe they'll allow it. Want to contest a fine? You'll need to appear before the Covenants Committee. What's that? A group of fellow residents handpicked by the board. No legal training, no judicial oversight, no transparency, just a handful of suburban enforcers sitting in judgment of your life. You know what they call this? Alternative dispute resolution. You know what it really is? Controlled opposition. A sandbox where they let you scream into a pillow while they tighten the leash around your throat. And if you lose, which you will, they'll add the cost of the meeting to your account. And if you refuse to pay, they'll attach that unpaid fine to your property. Not just as a note, as a lien. A legal dagger into your home's value. One that poisons your title, blocks refinancing, and threatens foreclosure. That's right. They can take your house. Not for a crime, but for a non-compliant mailbox. And here's the real kicker. They don't even need a courtroom. HOAs have the power to foreclose on homes through non-judicial processes in over 30 U.S. states. That means no judge, no jury, just process. Cold, fast, final. And once it's done, your home goes up for auction. Usually scooped up by connected insiders for pennies on the dollar. You disappear. Quietly. Without headlines. Just another problem homeowner who couldn't follow the rules. But rules written by who? Enforced by who? Benefiting who? That's what no one asks. Because if they did, if they truly understood the machine behind the letters, they'd riot. But they don't. Because this isn't just a hidden system. It's a weaponized silence, built to operate in shadows, shielded by fake smiles and community newsletters. And while you mow your lawn and wave to the neighbors, they're moving pieces on a board you don't even know exists. This isn't just control. It's a quiet coup, one that replaces law with loyalty, rights with rules, and men with subjects. And the only way to win is to stop playing. You ever wonder why HOAs love fences? Not just around your backyard, but around your mind. Picket fences, brick walls, gated entrances with little call boxes and flower beds. They tell you it's for security, but it's not. It's for separation, segregation, containment, because fences aren't just physical. They're psychological architecture, symbols of control, safety, boundaries. And every morning you wake up inside one, you get a little more used to the idea that you don't control the space you live in. That someone else is watching, that someone else is setting the tone, that someone else holds the keys. What happens when your neighbor builds a fence 1 inch taller than yours? He gets a letter. Why? Because that 1 inch threatens the illusion of order. And order, fake order, is the foundation of the entire HOA empire. HOAs aren't built to protect homes. They're built to protect homogeneity. The belief that everything and everyone must fit inside a box. Same lawns, same siding, same political silence. You think they care about your grass being too long? They care that you didn't ask first, that you didn't obey. It's not about aesthetics. It's about submission. Because when men stop acting like kings in their own homes, they become tenants of a false peace. They'll tell you the rules are there to prevent chaos. But the truth is, the rules create it. then sell you a solution made of fear. Fear of fines, fear of confrontation, fear of being the neighbor who doesn't follow the rules. And so you comply, not because you agree, but because it's easier. That's how tyranny grows in silence. Not in war zones, but in cul-de-sacs. Not with armies, but with committees. And here's what makes it dangerous. You start to believe you're safe. Safe inside the fence. Safe with cameras on the corners. Safe because everyone looks, acts, and thinks the same. But you're not safe. You're just contained. And that containment, it changes you. You become quieter, less curious, less sovereign. And before you know it, you're asking permission to plant a tree in your own soil. You've become the very thing this country was supposed to rebel against. A man with a home, but no freedom inside it. Understand this. The fences were never meant to keep danger out. They were built to keep you in. And if you want out, you'll have to climb. Not over wood or wire, but over conditioning. Because the greatest battle isn't on your front lawn. It's in your mind. Let's talk about control. Not through violence, but through narrative. Because that's the real weapon here. HOAs don't need guns. They don't need force. They don't need blackmail, or prison cells, or riot shields. They have something far more effective. Consensus. If enough people believe something, it becomes law. No matter how irrational, unconstitutional, or inhuman. And that's exactly how they operate. They rewrite reality by managing perception. And they manage perception through documentation. Violation notices, community guidelines, meeting minutes, fine schedules, architectural review forms. Each one looks harmless. Each one feels reasonable. But stack them together, and what you have is a new language. One designed not to inform, but to indoctrinate. Because the moment you accept their paperwork as truth, you stop asking real questions. You forget that land once meant ownership, that a home once meant sovereignty, that your front porch was once an altar of freedom. Instead, you start measuring your life by their scale. Is my lawn within code? Is my Christmas display approved? Did I get my paint color signed off? You become a function, not a force. And the worst part? You're encouraged to enforce it on others. Welcome to the real battlefield, where you are the weapon. See, HOAs thrive on internal policing. They don't need to spy on you when your neighbor is already reporting your garbage can to the board. They don't need to monitor your porch when concerned residents are sending anonymous tips to the enforcement hotline. They've outsourced tyranny to the residents themselves. Fear disguised as civic duty. Control disguised as community pride. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system. You ever wonder why resistance rarely works? Why the guy who stood up at the meeting got labeled aggressive? Why the woman who questioned the finances was called disruptive? Why the homeowner who refused to pay a bogus fine was suddenly painted as a danger to harmony? Because HOAs don't destroy your argument. They destroy your identity. They isolate you, invalidate you, make you radioactive to your neighbors. Because if they can redefine you as the threat, they don't have to address the threat you're exposing. And that's how they win. Not by proving you wrong, but by making it impossible for you to be right. You want to fight them with logic? They'll drown you in policy. You want to resist? They'll call it escalation. You want to leave? They'll make sure you can't sell without their approval. Because this war isn't about property. It's about perception. And until you wake up to that truth, you'll keep losing battles. In a war you don't even know you're in. Most people think HOAs are modern. Something that started in the 70s or 80s when suburban sprawl exploded and developers needed a way to keep things tidy. They're wrong. HOAs are just the newest skin on a very old creature. A creature born out of restriction, exclusion, and control. one that predates the Constitution, one that traces back to ancient covenants of land, power, and obedience. You want to see something chilling? Go read the original CC&RS, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, attached to your property deed. Buried in that legal text you never read are rules written by the dead. Clauses crafted 50, 80, even 100 years ago, still in effect. Some of them are so old, they were written in typewriters. Some in hand. Some in language that no longer belongs in any civilized country. And yet, they are binding. Why? Because no one ever revoked them. Because no one ever questioned them. Because every generation signs without reading, agrees without knowing, obeys without resisting. These documents were created by developers who've been dead for decades, by lawyers who never imagined your life, your family, your reality. But still, they rule you. What color you can paint your house, whether you can grow food in your own backyard, how many vehicles you can park, whether your kid's treehouse is architecturally harmonious, all decided by ghosts in paper. It's legal necromancy, control from the grave. And what's worse, many of these original restrictions were born out of racism, classism, and social exclusion. That's the dirty secret HOAs don't want you to know. They were created not to build community, but to filter it, to keep undesirable families out, to preserve property values by preserving power. And although the language has been sanitized, the system remains. A structure that protects conformity, a legacy that punishes difference, a set of rules that pretends to be about safety while enforcing submission. And you live inside that system, thinking you're free, because your mortgage is paid, because your lawn is trimmed, because your neighbors wave. But freedom doesn't come from compliance. It comes from conscious rebellion, from questioning the invisible chains binding your life to a rulebook written by men who never knew you and would never have accepted you. Understand this. You are not just fighting Karen from the HOA board. You are fighting a legacy of invisible rulers, a power structure handed down like a curse. And if you don't break it, your children will inherit it. They'll inherit your house, your fence, your fees, your fear. And one day, they'll ask you, why didn't you stop this when you had the chance? We break the chain, or we become it. This is where it ends or begins. Because now you know. You've seen behind the curtains, beneath the lawns, through the fence lines, and into the heart of a system built not on liberty, but leverage. The HOA isn't just a nuisance. It's a blueprint, a controlled experiment in manufactured obedience, disguised as neighborly order. And the reason it exists is because it works. You want to know why they let these associations run unchecked? Because it's a test of how easily the average man can be made to kneel. Not through violence, but through civility. The board meeting replaces the courtroom. The violation notice replaces the sheriff. And your own neighbor becomes the prison guard who keeps you in line with a smile and a clipboard. This is the future they're practicing for. A society where control doesn't need a badge, just a form. Where resistance doesn't get crushed, it gets reclassified. Where men give up their power, not because they were forced to, but because it was easier than reading the rulebook. But not you. Because if you've watched this far, something inside you is awake. And once a man sees the invisible battlefield, he doesn't go back to mowing the lawn and nodding at lies. He arms himself. With truth. With clarity. With a refusal to bend ever again. You think buying the lake was the victory? No. The victory was seeing them for what they are. The fine for fishing? That was the alarm clock. The board meetings? Training grounds. The bylaws and deed restrictions? Maps of the maze they built to keep lions asleep in cages made of paperwork. But you're not asleep anymore, are you? You see now why they hated me. Not because I fished, because I acted, because I used the very tools they tried to control me with. Law, paperwork, ownership, and flipped the script. I became what they feared, a man who understands the game and plays it better. So here's your call. Tear up the script they handed you. Dig into your documents. Challenge the rules. Show up at the meetings. Record everything. Expose the hypocrisy. Buy the damn lake if you have to. Because if enough men wake up, the fences fall. The fake authority collapses. The paper kings are dethroned. And your home becomes what it was always meant to be. A fortress of sovereignty. A place where no clipboard controls your destiny. So if you're still here, still watching, still burning with that feeling in your gut that something isn't right, you're one of us now. Drop this in the comments. Loud, twice, like you mean it. No more fences. No more kings. Write it once for your past. And once for every man who still thinks the HOA was ever about peace. This war doesn't end at the mailbox. It begins when you finally stop asking permission and start taking back the land.